I'm not driven by avenging my dead family, Morty. That was fake. I'm driven by finding that McNugget sauce. I want that Mulan McNugget sauce, Morty. That's my series arc, Morty. If it takes 9 seasons, I want my McNugget tipping sauce, Szechuan sauce.
Every
Morty.
story, no matter how simple or complex, follows a basic formula. It introduces a conflict, develops it, and resolves it. Whether this is achieved in 3, 5, or even 17 acts if that's possible, every story follows this pattern. And it is the most important thing any good storyteller needs to understand. Even a show as chaotic as, say, Rick and Morty follows this pattern to a T. This series focuses on Morty Smith, an insecure teenager, and his nihilistic genius grandfather, Rick Sanchez, as they go on a cacophony of multi-dimensional misadventures. It's a bonkers but grounded series that explores a lot of fascinating ideas and relatable themes. However, the specific story structure that Rick and Morty follows is one that has become quite popular recently, and gives its creators a pretty strong foundation with which to tell their stories. And it's why, in this episode of The Storyteller's Notebook, a series in which I analyze various storytelling techniques used by various creators in various mediums, I want to talk about Rick and Morty's story structure and the different ways it can be used. And yes, spoilers ahead. Rick and Morty is built on a structure developed by Dan Harmon, one of the show's co-creators, called the Story Circle. It is made up of 8 steps, which are, well, I'll let its creator explain.
You've got a character that you can identify with that has some kind of need, wish, incompletion, causes them to go across a threshold where the story changes direction. They go down a road of trials, searching for something. They find it, whether they like it or not. It kind of kicks their ass, and they come back to the world they started in, having changed. You need to go search for something, find it, take it, and then return. Changed.
It's a simple guideline that, as Harmon himself points out, is a simplification of Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. A plot structure made up of 12 to 17 steps, depending on how detailed you want to get. But Campbell's model is based on his studies of mythology and religion, and is more so built for epic fantasies and, well, heroic journeys, like Star Wars or The Lord of the Rings. It doesn't work that well for anything that falls out of the realm of myth and legend. This is where the Story Circle comes in to offer an alternative that is much more flexible for a far wider variety of stories, from Die Hard or Breaking Bad to Toy Story. And if you pay attention, you can see the 8 steps playing out in each episode as you watch. For example, a Bricklin Time starts with the characters coming out of a time stop, and Rick warns Morty and Summer to be careful in case they accidentally break time, which of course does not stop the inevitable time split from happening. Rick does his best to fix the situation, even becoming paranoid that the alternate version of himself is trying to kill him. Until a 4th dimensional being arrives to fix everything with colors that realign their time streams. However, he also discovers that Rick has some illegal time crystals, so the trio break the colors to distract the 4th dimensional creature, and Rick beats him up. Rick quickly fixes the colors as the time dimension starts to fall apart, but one of the many Morty's collars won't close properly. So, that Rick gives Morty his collar to save him, and is about to accept his death when he sees the broken collar Morty had and just barely manages to save himself.
Yes! You God! Not today, bitch!
The episode introduces us to, develops, and resolves a conflict that brings about change for our characters. It's harder to tell in some episodes, but we can see the story circle being used to great effect to explore some interesting ideas. Although, you're not limited to just one circle per story. Hell, I didn't even mention Jerry and Beth's story in A Bricklin Time. But given the fact that the story circle is based around the needs, struggles, and progress of your story's characters, you can give a circle to each one within your story, or at least the ones you want people to focus on. Rick's Minutes has 3 major story circles in it, one for Summer, one for Jerry, and one for Beth. Although, admittedly, Jerry and Beth's circles are pretty much identical to each other. After being given a device that lets them see through the eyes of alternate versions of themselves, Summer sees how insignificant her life is, and while at first horrified by the idea, going so far as to try and run away so she doesn't waste it like her parents, she eventually comes to terms with it. Meanwhile, Jerry and Beth see how amazing their lives could have been if they had separated, but after also seeing how depressed those versions of themselves are, realize that they are better off together. Rick and Morty, meanwhile, don't have a story circle in this episode. They just spend the whole thing watching interdimensional cable, letting the focus fall on the other characters for a change. We can see multiple story circles being used to develop the show's many characters. And these story circles do not need to stand alone, as the way these different arcs intersect and conflict with each other can make the stories even more engaging. The season 3 premiere of Rick and Morty is a great example of this. For Rick's side of the episode, we see his desire to escape the prison he's trapped in come into conflict with his interrogator's desire to discover the equation that makes Rick's portal gun work. Their goals go against each other, as if Rick escapes, the interrogator won't get the equation, but if the interrogator gets the equation, Rick won't be able to escape. Thus, an interesting conflict arises as we get to see each character do their best to achieve their goals. Eventually, the interrogator manages to get the portal gun equation, reaching the 5th step of his arc, only to discover that Rick has tricked him, which he pays consequences for by having his story circle come to an abrupt end. But Rick manages to escape the mental prison he's stuck in and reach his 5th step. Meanwhile, Morty and Summer both have conflicting desires, with Summer wanting to save Rick and Morty wanting to protect her from their grandfather's destructive influence. She realizes she can use the portal gun of the dead Rick in their back garden to save him, until Morty teleports them to the dimension he and Rick abandoned to show her the damage Rick can do. However, they end up having the portal gun smashed by that dimension's version of their family, and though they're saved by members of the Citadel of Ricks, they end up accidentally sending them on an assassination mission to kill their Rick, the consequences for which start to play out in Rick's story. It shows how story circles can collide and cross each other to make a story much more engaging to watch. Every great story is built on a basic structure, but that doesn't limit them in any way. As Rick and Morty shows, even the simplest of formulas can be used in a variety of ways to create interesting and unique conflicts and situations. And this can be applied to any story structure you can think of. Being able to create a solid foundation for your story is the most important aspect of storytelling to get right, and when you do, it can lead to some great things.
I turned myself into a pickle, Morty! Boom! Big reveal, I'm a pickle!
And yeah, those are my thoughts. I gotta say, I've been applying Dan Harmon's story circle to some personal projects recently and it's been working really well. For me, it's just a really solid structure to build off of for your stuff. So I'll be leaving links in the description to the blog where he fully explains how the whole thing works and his philosophy on storytelling. It's a great read and it's been a big help for me. And if you're still interested in learning more about how to develop your characters, I'll also leave a link to my video on My Hero Academia and the interesting ways it develops its characters. Anyway, tell me what you think. If you agree, disagree, if you find the story circle useful, why you thought of the season 3 finale, if that's come out yet, which, if I don't get lazy, should be coming out the day after I upload this, etc. And thanks for watching. If you want to see more, check out my last video where I talk about the more existential and nightmarish themes of Made in Abyss. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and of course, subscribe to come flag me. And hopefully, I'll see you later.